I won a lottery jackpot, stayed silent, then made a shocking request to my family. My name is Lorraine Washington, and at 60 years old, I thought I knew everything there was to know about my family. I was wrong, dead wrong. And it took winning $127 million in the Powerball to realize just how little I actually knew about the people I'd spent my entire life loving and protecting. Let me start from the beginning, though. Because this story isn't just about money, it's about family secrets and the uncomfortable truths that surface when desperation meets opportunity. Chapter 1. The Numbers That Changed Everything. It was a Tuesday night in February, and Detroit was buried under 3 feet of snow. I was sitting in my small kitchen on the east side, the same kitchen where I'd raised 3 children as a single mother, where I'd counted pennies for groceries for 40 years, where I'd cried over bills I couldn't pay and celebrated the small victories that kept us afloat. The house was quiet, too quiet. My youngest, Marcus, had moved out 6 months ago to live with his girlfriend in Atlanta. My daughter, Keisha, was in Chicago, climbing the corporate ladder at some consulting firm. And my oldest, Jerome, lived just 20 minutes away, but might as well have been on Mars for how often I saw him. I pulled out my reading glasses and checked the lottery numbers on my phone, something I'd been doing religiously every Wednesday and Saturday for 15 years. Same numbers every time: 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and the Powerball 18. My children's birthdays and the day I bought my first house: 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and Powerball 18. I blinked, read them again, then a third time. My hands started shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I grabbed the ticket from my purse with trembling fingers and checked it against the screen again and again. $127 million. After taxes, roughly $78 million. I sat there in that kitchen for 3 hours staring at that ticket, wondering if I was having some kind of senior moment. But no, the numbers were right there. Black ink on white paper, matching perfectly with what glowed on my phone screen. For the first time in 40 years, money wouldn't be a problem, ever again. Chapter 2. The Weight of Silence. Most people would have called everyone they knew, posted on Facebook, screamed from the rooftops, but I've been poor for too long to trust sudden fortune. Growing up in Alabama during segregation, then moving to Detroit as a young mother during the city's decline, I'd learned that good news often came with a catch, so I stayed quiet. For 2 weeks, I went about my routine, working my part-time job at Mayer, attending Wednesday night Bible study at New Hope Baptist, playing dominoes with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. I cashed in the ticket quietly, hired a lawyer, and set up trusts. All the while, I watched my family, really watched them. Jerome called on that Sunday like he had every Sunday for the past 5 years, but this time, I listened differently. "Hey, Mama, how you doing?" "I'm fine, baby." "How's Denise and the kids?" "Denise is, well, you know how she is. Always wanting something we can't afford. And Jamal needs new cleats for football." But with my hours getting cut at the plant, Jerome had been working at the Ford plant for 18 years. Good, steady work, but the auto industry wasn't what it used to be. I heard the exhaustion in his voice, the worry he tried to hide. "How much you need for the cleats, son?" "Nah, Mama, I wasn't asking for money. You know I don't like doing that." But he was asking. Not directly, but the need hung in his voice like smoke. Keisha called the next day, unusual for her. She typically texted or sent voice messages when she was too busy to talk. "Mom, I hope you're sitting down." My heart jumped. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Well, actually, something amazing happened. I got promoted to senior director. Can you believe it? Your daughter is now making 6 figures. I should have been proud. I was proud. But something in her voice. "That's wonderful, baby. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Mom. It's been a long road, you know. All those years of you working double shifts to pay for my college, all those sacrifices. I finally made it." There it was. Guilt. My successful daughter, who'd fought her way up in a predominantly white corporation, was still carrying the weight of what it had cost me to get her there. Marcus called that Friday, and I could hear Atlanta traffic in the background. "Grandmama!" I heard my 3-year-old granddaughter Zoe's voice in the background. "Tell Grandmama hi, baby," Marcus said. Then to me, "Mom, I've got some news." Good news or bad news? Both, I guess. Shanice is pregnant again. My heart swelled. Another grandbaby. That's wonderful. Yeah, but, Mom, we're barely making it as it is. Shanice wants to stay home with both kids and my salary at the shipping company. It's not enough. I've been thinking about taking a second job, maybe driving for Uber at night, but then I'd never see Zoe. 3 children. 3 different struggles. All of them too proud to ask directly. All of them carrying burdens they thought they had to bear alone. For 2 weeks, I carried this knowledge like a stone in my chest. I had the power to fix everything. Every financial worry, every sleepless night spent calculating bills, every dream deferred because of money. But something held me back. I needed to see who they really were when they thought nobody was watching. Chapter 3. Testing the waters. I decided to test them, not cruelly, but I needed to understand the people my children had become. Money changes everything. And I'd seen too many families destroyed by sudden wealth. I started small. I called Jerome and told him I'd gotten a small bonus at work, $500, and wanted to help with Jamal's cleats. "Mama, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to." "You sure? I know things are tight for you too." We met at the sporting goods store on Saturday. Jerome was quiet as we walked through the aisles, and I could see him doing math in his head, looking at price tags with the careful calculation of someone who'd learned to stretch every dollar. "These are fine, Mama," he said, picking up a basic pair. "What about those?" I pointed to a higher-end pair. "Those are too much. These will work just fine." As we stood in line, Jerome turned to me. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about what would happen if one of us made it big, like really big? Would it change us?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, sometimes I watch those shows about people who win the lottery or get famous, and they always talk about how it ruins families. People coming out of nowhere asking for money, relationships getting weird." He was quiet for a moment. "I think about that sometimes when I buy my scratch-offs. Like, what if I won big? Would you still be proud of me, or would you just see dollar signs?" My heart broke a little. "Jerome Washington, I have been proud of you every single day since you were born. Money couldn't change that." "I know, Mama, I know you would be. But what about Keisha? What about Marcus? What about Denise's family?" "Sometimes I think maybe it's better to just, have enough. Not too little, not too much. Just enough." That night, I called Keisha. I told her the same story. "A small bonus? Did she need anything?" "Oh, Mom, that's so sweet, but I'm doing fine. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. I've been thinking about buying a house here in Chicago, and I wanted to know if you'd consider moving here with me." "Move to Chicago?" "I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. Detroit is, well, it's not getting better. I worry about you there by yourself. I could get you a nice apartment near me, or even a little house. You could retire. Maybe take some of those art classes you always talked about." "Keisha, baby, that's sweet, but I know you love Detroit. I know it's home. But Mom, I make good money now. I can take care of you the way you took care of us. You've been taking care of everyone else your whole life. Maybe it's time to let someone take care of you." After we hung up, I sat in my living room, looking at the family photos covering every surface. Keisha at her college graduation, beaming in her cap and gown. Jerome in his army uniform before his deployment to Iraq. Marcus, holding newborn Zoe. My successful daughter wanted to rescue me from the city that had shaped us both. She saw my staying in Detroit as stubbornness, maybe even foolish pride. She couldn't see what I saw, that this neighborhood, this house, These roots were part of who I was. When I called Marcus, I could hear Zoe singing in the background. "Mama's having a tea party," Marcus explained. "Zoe, say hi to Grandmama." "Hi, Grandmama." "I miss you." "I miss you too, baby girl." "Marcus, I got a little extra money this month. You want me to send something for Zoe?" "Mom, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. What if I sent $100? You could get her something nice or save it for the new baby." There was a long pause. "Mom, are you okay? You sound different." "Different how?" "I don't know, like worried about something. Is everything all right?" My youngest had always been the most perceptive. Even as a little boy, he could sense when I was stressed about money or worried about his siblings. "I'm fine, baby. Just thinking about family, I guess." "Mom, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "Sometimes I feel like I failed you. Like, here you are, still working at 60, still worrying about all of us. Jerome's struggling, I'm struggling, and Keisha's doing great, but she's in another city. None of us are where you probably hoped we'd be when you were raising us. Marcus Washington, don't you ever— No, let me finish. I know you're proud of us, I know you love us. But I also know you sacrificed everything to raise us right. And what do we have to show for it? Jerome's got a family he can barely support. I'm about to have 2 kids and I'm scared I can't provide for them. And Keisha's successful, but she's all alone in Chicago working 18-hour days." He was quiet for a moment. "I just want you to know that if I ever get the chance, if I ever make some real money, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure you never have to work again. You deserve to rest, Mom. You've earned it." That night, I lay awake until dawn, thinking about my children's words. Jerome worried that money would change how his family saw him. Keisha wanted to rescue me from a life she thought was too small. Marcus carried guilt about my sacrifices and dreams of erasing them with success. None of them were thinking about what they could get. They were all thinking about what they could give. Chapter 4. The Weight of Revelation. 3 weeks after winning, I finally made a decision. But it wasn't the decision I thought I'd make. I called each of my children and told them I needed to see them, together, in Detroit. It was important. Jerome came over first with Denise and my grandsons, 13-year-old Jamal and 9-year-old Kevin. Denise looked tired, carrying that expression I recognized from my own mirror during the hardest years, the look of a mother trying to stretch resources that wouldn't stretch. Keisha flew in from Chicago looking polished and professional, even in casual clothes. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Whatever you need to tell us, we'll handle it together." Marcus drove up from Atlanta with Shanice and little Zoe. The house suddenly felt alive again, full of voices and children's laughter and the comfortable chaos of family. We gathered in the living room after dinner, the kids playing in the basement, the adults settling into chairs and couches with coffee and leftover sweet potato pie. "Mama, you're scaring us a little," Jerome said. "Is everything okay? Are you sick?" "I'm not sick, but I do have something important to tell you all." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder of papers, bank statements, trust documents, lawyers' letters. My hands were shaking again. 3 weeks ago, I won the Powerball lottery. After taxes, $78 million. The room went completely silent. Not the comfortable silence of family, but the stunned silence of people trying to process impossible information. Keisha spoke first. "Mom, what did you say?" "I won the lottery, $78 million. Marcus laughed, not from humor but from shock. "Mom, that's not funny." I handed him the bank statement. He stared at it, then passed it to Jerome, who passed it to Keisha, who passed it to Denise, who passed it back to Marcus. "Oh my God," Shanice whispered. "Oh my God, this is real." "Why didn't you tell us?" Keisha asked, and I could hear hurt in her voice. "Because I needed to see something first. I needed to understand who you all were when you thought nobody was watching." I told them about the past 3 weeks, about listening to their phone calls differently, about the small tests, about what I'd learned. Jerome. When I offered to help with Jamal's cleats, you chose the cheapest ones and asked me if money would change how I saw you. Keisha, you wanted to take care of me, to give me the retirement you thought I deserved. Marcus, you felt guilty about my sacrifices and dreamed of erasing them. I looked around the room at their faces. Confusion, hurt, hope, fear, all mixed together. For 3 weeks, I've been trying to figure out what to do with this money. I've seen too many stories about lottery winners whose families fell apart, about children who became greedy, about relationships that got poisoned by wealth. So what are you saying? Jerome asked quietly. I'm saying that I realized something important. This money isn't mine. It never was. It belongs to all of us, to this family, to the community that raised us and shaped us. But before I could share it, I needed to know that sharing it wouldn't destroy us. Chapter 5. The Shocking Request. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where my children had played, where I'd watched them grow up, where neighbors had become family during the hardest times. I have a proposal for all of you, but it's going to sound crazy, and it's going to require something from each of you that might be harder than you think. I turned back to face them. I want to give each of your families $10 million. Jerome, Marcus, Keisha, $10 million each, but there are conditions. The room was so quiet I could hear the kids laughing in the basement, could hear the old house settling around us. The first condition is that you can't quit your jobs immediately. You have to work for at least 1 more year, learn to manage wealth while still living in the real world. The second condition is that you have to use at least $1 million to help other families in situations like ours. Single mothers, struggling families, kids who need help with college. I took a deep breath. And the third condition is the one that's going to be hardest. What is it, Mama? Marcus asked. You all have to move back to Detroit within 2 years. You have to commit to rebuilding this city, to investing in this community, to showing the world that Black families with resources can transform the places that made us. The silence stretched longer this time. Keisha was the first to speak. Mom, Detroit is... my career's in Chicago. The opportunities there... There are no opportunities here that can't be created with $10 million and the will to create them. But the schools, Denise said quietly, the crime rate... What if we could change that? What if we could be part of the solution instead of part of the exodus? Jerome was staring at his hands. Mama, are you asking us to give up our lives to fulfill your dream? The question hit harder than I expected. Maybe I am, but let me ask you something, Jerome. What is your life right now? Working at a plant that's cutting hours, struggling to pay for your kids' needs, watching your wife stress about money every single day. Is that the life you don't want to give up? That's not fair, he said, but his voice was soft. You're right. It's not fair. None of this is fair. It's not fair that I had to work 3 jobs to raise you kids. It's not fair that Keisha has to work in a city 800 miles from her family to make the kind of money she deserves. It's not fair that Marcus is about to work nights driving Uber just to afford having another baby. But you know what else isn't fair? I sat back down, facing all of them. It's not fair that we have the resources now to change all of that, not just for us, but for thousands of other families, and we might choose to just live comfortable lives somewhere else instead. Marcus was bouncing Zoe on his knee, and she was playing with his phone, oblivious to the conversation that was reshaping her future. What would we do here, Mom? He asked. What would our lives look like? That's up to you. Start businesses, buy buildings and renovate them, fund after-school programs, create jobs. Keisha, you could start your own consulting firm right here, focusing on urban development. Marcus, you could buy property, flip houses, create affordable housing. Jerome, you could start a manufacturing business, bring jobs back to the community. Or we could fail, Jerome said. We could lose the money and end up worse than we started. That's true. That's a real risk. But what's the alternative? Take the money, move to suburbs in different states, live comfortable lives while the neighborhood that raised us continues to decline? Shanice spoke for the first time since we'd started the serious conversation. What about the kids, Zoe and the new baby? They'd grow up in a Detroit that's being rebuilt by their own family. They'd see their parents and grandparents as people who didn't just escape poverty. They transformed it. Chapter 6. The Long Night. We talked until 3 a.m. The conversation went in circles, raised voices, tears, long silences, moments of laughter when someone would say, "I can't believe we're arguing about what to do with $78 million. Some of the concerns were practical. Keisha had a lease in Chicago, a career she'd built over 15 years. Marcus and Shanice had friends in Atlanta, a life they were building. Jerome and Denise were already in Detroit, but the idea of taking such a big financial risk scared them. Some of the concerns were deeper. Keisha worried she'd never find the same professional opportunities in Detroit. Marcus wondered if bringing kids into the city was fair to them, even with money to buffer the challenges. Jerome questioned whether he was capable of running a business, whether he had the education and experience to succeed. But underneath all the practical concerns was something else. Fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of taking on responsibility bigger than themselves. "Can I tell you all something?" Denise said around midnight. We were all tired, emotionally drained, but nobody wanted to leave the conversation unfinished. I grew up in Detroit, too, on the west side, near where the old Corktown used to be thriving. I watched my neighborhood fall apart, watched my friends' families leave one by one for the suburbs or other cities. I watched the corner stores close down, the schools get worse, the houses get abandoned. She looked around the room. When Jerome and I got married, I made him promise we'd move to the suburbs as soon as we could afford it. I didn't want our kids growing up like I did, feeling like they had to escape their own neighborhood to have a future. Jerome reached for her hand. "Denise." "But sitting here tonight, listening to Mama's idea, I keep thinking about my grandmother. She used to say that running away from a problem just leaves it for the next generation to deal with. What if we stayed? What if we were part of making Detroit a place where kids don't have to escape to succeed?" Keisha was crying quietly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "In Chicago, I know who I am. I know how to navigate the corporate world there. I know which restaurants to take clients to, which neighborhoods to live in, how to dress, how to talk. Coming back to Detroit with this much money and this much responsibility. What if I fail? What if I embarrass all of us?" "What if you don't fail?" Marcus asked. "What if you succeed beyond anything you could do in Chicago?" "That scares me too." We all laughed, the tension breaking a little. "Mama," Jerome said, "can I ask you something honestly? Always. Are you doing this because you want us to come home? Or because you really think this is the best way to use the money?" I thought about it for a long moment. Both. I won't lie to you. I want my family close. I want to watch my grandchildren grow up. I want Sunday dinners and holidays and all of that. But Jerome, if I just wanted you close, I could give you the money with no conditions and let you choose. This is about something bigger. I gestured toward the window, toward the neighborhood beyond. This is about breaking cycles. Not just the cycle of poverty in our family, but the cycle of abandonment in our community. Every successful Black family that leaves Detroit takes their resources, their connections, their influence with them. What if we stayed? What if we invested not just money but ourselves in rebuilding? It would take more than just us, Keisha pointed out. Of course it would, but it has to start somewhere. It has to start with someone willing to bet on a future that doesn't exist yet. Chapter 7. The morning after. We finally went to bed around 3 a.m. with no resolution. I gave everyone my spare keys and told them to think about it, take their time, talk to their spouses and partners privately. I woke up around 9 to the sound of children playing in the backyard and coffee brewing in the kitchen. Jerome was up first, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad covered in numbers. "Morning, Mama. I've been doing some math." "Good morning, baby. What kind of math?" "The kind where I figure out whether your plan makes sense financially." He showed me the pad. "If we take the $10 million and invest conservatively, we could live off the interest and never touch the principal. That's about $400,000 a year, which is more than I'll make in my lifetime at the plant." That's good math. "But if we use it to start businesses, buy property, employ people, it's riskier, but the potential return is bigger, not just financially, but socially." Keisha came downstairs in pajamas, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. "Morning. Is there more coffee?" "In the pot. How'd you sleep?" "Terrible. I kept thinking about everything." She poured coffee and sat down across from Jerome. "I called my friend Monica last night after we finished talking. She's a partner at a law firm in Detroit, focuses on urban development and municipal law." "What did she say?" "She said there's more opportunity in Detroit right now than there's been in decades. The city is offering incentives for businesses. There's federal money flowing in for development, and because so much of the property is still affordable, you can make a real impact with the kind of money we're talking about." Marcus came down next, carrying a still sleepy Zoe. "Morning, everyone. Zoe, say good morning to Grandmama." "Morning, Grandmama. Can we have pancakes?" "Of course we can, baby girl." As I cooked breakfast, I listened to my children talk, not about whether they'd accept my conditions, but about what their lives might look like if they did. Jerome talked about manufacturing businesses that could employ hundreds of people. Keisha described consulting work with the city, with nonprofits, with other businesses moving to Detroit. Marcus wondered about buying blocks of abandoned houses and renovating them for young families. Denise came down with the boys, who immediately asked if they could walk to the corner store for candy. "The corner store that used to be a crack house?" Denise asked. "It's been cleaned up," I told her. "New owner, Pakistani family. They're good people." After breakfast, we all walked to the store together. It was a beautiful March morning, cold but sunny, and the neighborhood looked different with my family filling the sidewalks. The kids ran ahead, Zoe holding her cousin Kevin's hand, and I watched the adults taking in the details. The houses that had been renovated, the ones that still needed work, the empty lots that could become gardens or playgrounds. At the store, the owner, Mr. Hassan, greeted me warmly. "Ms. Lorraine." "Good morning. And this is your family?" I introduced everyone and watched Mr. Hassan light up as he talked about the neighborhood, about the changes he'd seen in the 3 years since he'd bought the store, about his hopes for his own children who went to school just 6 blocks away. On the walk back, Marcus was quiet, thoughtful. "What are you thinking about, baby?" "I'm thinking about what Mr. Hassan said, about this being a neighborhood where families can build something. In Atlanta, Shanice and I are just existing, you know? We go to work, we pay rent, we try to save a little money, but we're not building anything permanent." "You could build something permanent anywhere with $10 million, Keisha pointed out. "Could I? Or would I just be building something comfortable?" That afternoon, Keisha borrowed my car and drove around the city by herself. She was gone for 3 hours, and when she came back, she looked like she'd been crying. "You okay, baby?" I drove past our old elementary school. It's been closed for 5 years, but there's a sign saying a nonprofit is trying to raise money to reopen it as a community center. "What made you cry?" I remembered being 8 years old and walking to school with Jerome every morning, how safe I felt because I knew every person on every block between here and there. I remembered Mrs. Johnson, who used to sit on her porch and make sure all the kids got to school safely. I remembered Mr. Williams, who would give us free candy if we could spell our vocabulary words correctly. She sat down heavily. That school could be reopened with what you're offering me alone. Those kinds of relationships, that sense of community. You can't buy that in Chicago. You can buy safety, you can buy good schools, but you can't buy the feeling of being rooted somewhere. Chapter 8. The Decision. That evening, we had another family meeting. This time, the energy was different. Instead of fear and uncertainty, there was excitement mixed with nervousness. Jerome spoke first. I talked to Denise all day, we're in. You sure? I'm terrified. But I'm in. I want to try manufacturing. Maybe start with something small like furniture or home goods. Detroit has a history of making things, and there's no reason we can't bring that back. Keisha nodded. I'm in too. I've been thinking about urban planning and development consulting. There are so many cities trying to figure out what Detroit is figuring out. We could build a practice here and export the expertise everywhere. Marcus was holding Shanice's hand. We talked about it all afternoon. We're scared about the schools, scared about raising kids in the city, but we're also excited about the possibility of being part of something bigger than ourselves. So, you're in? We're in. I want to focus on housing, buying abandoned properties, renovating them, making them available for young families and seniors who want to stay in the neighborhood. I felt tears starting. So we're really doing this? We're doing it, Jerome said. But Mama, I have a condition of my own. What's that? You can't just give us the money and sit back. You have to be part of this too. What are you going to do with your share? I've been thinking about this for weeks. I want to start a foundation focused on single mothers, job training, childcare, small business loans, college scholarships for their kids. I want to create the kind of support system I could have used when you all were young. How much money are you keeping for yourself? Keisha asked. Enough to live comfortably and fund the foundation. I don't need luxury, baby. I need purpose. Denise had been quiet through most of the conversation. Can I say something? Of course. I've been thinking about something Mama said last night, about breaking cycles. I grew up poor. Jerome grew up poor. Our kids were growing up poor. Not just financially poor, but poor in opportunities, poor in expectations, poor in the belief that we could change our circumstances. She looked around the room. What we're talking about doing. It's not just about money, it's about showing our kids, showing all the kids in this neighborhood, what's possible when you don't just escape your circumstances, you transform them. That's a lot of pressure, Marcus pointed out. Everything worthwhile comes with pressure, I said. The question is whether you let the pressure crush you or whether you use it to create something beautiful. Chapter 9. 6 months later. By September, our lives had changed in ways I never could have imagined. Jerome had quit his job at the plant and was working with a team of designers and craftspeople to launch Detroit Handmade, a furniture company focused on pieces made from reclaimed wood from abandoned houses. His first collection wouldn't be ready until the following spring, but he was already getting orders from boutique stores in Chicago, to New York, and Los Angeles. Keisha had given notice in Chicago and moved back to Detroit, buying and renovating a beautiful house in the Boston Edison neighborhood. Her consulting firm, Motor City Development Solutions, was working with 3 different cities on urban renewal projects, and she had been invited to speak at conferences across the country about sustainable urban development. Marcus and Shanice had found a house just 4 blocks from mine, a 1920s colonial that they were slowly renovating while living in it. Marcus had purchased his first block of abandoned properties and was working with a contractor to develop them into affordable housing for young families. But the real changes were smaller, more personal. Sunday dinners at my house were a given now, with all the grandkids running through rooms that had been quiet for too long. Jerome and I had started a tradition of walking through the neighborhood every Thursday evening, talking to residents, learning about problems that needed solving. Keisha was volunteering at the community center that had been built in the old elementary school, teaching computer skills to adults. The foundation I'd started, Second Chance Families, had given out its first round of grants to 12 single mothers in the city, helping them with everything from childcare while they attended job training, to down payments on small houses, to startup costs for businesses. But perhaps the most significant change was in how we saw ourselves and our place in the world. We were no longer just surviving, just getting by. We were building something that would last beyond our own lives. Chapter 10. The Real Lottery. One evening in November, almost 9 months after winning the lottery, I was sitting in my living room grading homework for the GED classes I'd started teaching at the community center. The house was full. Jerome's family was there for dinner, Marcus had stopped by with Zoe and new baby Marcus Jr., and Keisha was working at my kitchen table, preparing for a presentation she was giving to the city council the next day. The sounds of family filled every corner of the house. Children playing, adults laughing, dishes clattering in the kitchen, the television murmuring in the background. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. Jerome came and sat beside me on the couch. "Mama, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I was thinking today about what you said that night, about the lottery ticket not really being yours. I think I understand now what you meant." "Tell me." "The money was never the real prize. The real lottery was having a family that could be trusted with something this big, that could come together and choose purpose over comfort." I looked around the room at my children, my grandchildren, my daughters-in-law. Marcus was on the floor building blocks with Zoe and Kevin. Keisha was explaining something to Shanice about property development, using napkins and salt shakers as visual aids. Denise was rocking the new baby while helping Jamal with his math homework. "You know what, Jerome? You're absolutely right." The real lottery was having children who grew up to be the kind of adults who would choose to stay and build rather than run and hide. "Are you happy, Mama?" "Really happy with how this all turned out." I thought about it. A year ago, I was working at Meijer, living paycheck to paycheck, seeing my children struggle, watching my neighborhood decline. Today, I was a millionaire philanthropist with a house full of family and a foundation that was changing lives. But more than that, I was a woman who had raised children capable of transforming not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. I was a grandmother whose grandchildren would grow up believing that they could change the world because they'd watched their parents do exactly that. Jerome, I've been happy before. When you were born, when you graduated high school, when you came back safe from Iraq, I was happy when Keisha got her first promotion, when Marcus got married, when each of the grandchildren was born. I paused, listening to the sounds of my family around me. But this kind of happiness, this is different. This isn't just personal joy. This is the happiness that comes from knowing your life had meaning beyond yourself. Chapter 11. 1 year later. The first anniversary of winning the lottery fell on a Tuesday, just like the night I'd checked those numbers that changed everything. But this Tuesday was different in every possible way. I woke up in the same house, in the same bedroom, but the sounds outside my window had changed. Instead of the occasional car and distant sirens, I heard construction sounds, the good kind. Marcus's crew was working on the third block of houses in his affordable housing project, and Jerome's workshop was humming with activity as Detroit Handmade prepared for their first major furniture show. At breakfast, I read emails on the tablet Keisha had bought me. Updates from the 12 families we'd helped through Second Chance Families, photos of children in new school clothes, pictures of small businesses that were thriving, thank you notes that made me cry happy tears. One email stood out. It was from Denise, even though she was upstairs getting the boys ready for school. "Dear Mama Lorraine," it began, and I smiled at her formality. I wanted to write this down because I'm not always good at saying important things out loud. A year ago, when you told us about the lottery, I thought you were crazy to put conditions on the money. I thought you were trying to control our lives, trying to force us into your vision of what our family should look like. I was wrong. Yesterday, Kevin came home from school excited because his teacher had talked about entrepreneurs in Detroit, and she'd mentioned Jerome's furniture company as an example of local businesses creating jobs. He was so proud to tell his class that was his daddy. Last week, Jamal told me he wants to study architecture so he can help redesign Detroit neighborhoods. He's 13 years old, and he's already thinking about how he can contribute to something bigger than himself. These boys are growing up with a completely different understanding of what's possible than I had, than Jerome had, than you had. They're growing up believing that they can change the world because they're watching their family do exactly that. The money changed our circumstances, but the decision to stay, to build, to invest ourselves in this community, that changed who we are. Thank you for being crazy enough to believe we were capable of this. Love, Denise. I was still crying over that email when Jerome knocked on my door. Mama, you okay? I'm perfect, baby. Just reading something beautiful. He sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. I have something to tell you. Good news or concerning news? Good news. Really good news. We got a call yesterday from a furniture store in California. They want to place an order for 200 pieces. That's more than we've sold in total since we started. That's wonderful. But that's not the best part. They called because they read an article about Detroit Handmade in a magazine about urban renewal and sustainable business. The article wasn't even about furniture. It was about families who are investing in rebuilding Detroit. He pulled out his phone and showed me the article. There we were, all of us. Jerome in his workshop, surrounded by beautiful furniture made from reclaimed wood. Keisha in a hard hat, standing in front of a construction site where her firm was consulting on a new mixed-income housing development. Marcus on the porch of one of his renovated houses, holding baby Marcus Jr. while Zoe played in the front yard. And me in the community center, teaching a GED class to a group of adults who were working toward their high school diplomas. The headline read, The Washington Family, How Lottery Winners Chose Community Over Comfort. We're famous, Jerome said, grinning. We're examples, I corrected. There's a difference. Chapter 12. Ripple Effects. By the afternoon, my phone was ringing constantly. The article had been picked up by national media, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk to the family that had won millions and chosen to stay in Detroit. The calls weren't just from reporters. They were from other lottery winners, from families who had inherited money, from successful business people who were considering how to give back to their communities. They wanted advice, inspiration, practical guidance on how to use wealth for community development. One call stood out. It was from a woman named Patricia Chen, calling from Oakland, California. Ms. Washington, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the reporter who wrote the article. I'm in a situation similar to what you were in a year ago, and I hoped you might have some advice. I'm happy to help if I can. My husband and I sold our tech company last year for $40 million. We grew up in Oakland, in a neighborhood that's been struggling with gentrification, displacement, rising rents. We've been trying to figure out how to use our resources to help without just becoming part of the problem. What kind of help are you thinking about? That's just it. We don't know. We've looked into donating to existing nonprofits, but we want to do something more direct, more personal. When I read about what your family did, about the conditions you set, about how you're all working together, it made me think maybe we're approaching this wrong. We talked for an hour. She told me about her neighborhood, about the families being pushed out by rising costs, about the small businesses closing down, about the community that was disappearing piece by piece. By the end of our conversation, she was crying. I just want to give back to the place that made us who we are, but I don't know how to do that without making things worse. Patricia, can I ask you something? When you think about your old neighborhood, what do you miss most? The relationships. The way everyone knew each other, looked out for each other's kids, shared resources when times were hard. The way you could walk down the street and have 5 conversations before you reached the corner. So what if your money went toward preserving and strengthening those relationships instead of just trying to fix problems? After we hung up, I sat thinking about that conversation. In the year since we'd started our projects, I'd learned that money alone doesn't solve community problems. But money combined with presence, with relationship, with long-term commitment, that could transform everything. That evening, Keisha came over with Chinese takeout and a legal pad full of notes. Mama, I've been getting calls all day from reporters and from other families. I think we might have accidentally started something. What do you mean? I mean, I've talked to 6 different families today who have significant wealth, inheritance, business sales, lottery winnings, and they're all asking the same question. How do we use this responsibly to help our communities without just throwing money at problems? She showed me her notes. There's a family in Milwaukee whose grandfather left them $2 million. A couple in Phoenix who won $5 million in a scratch-off game. A woman in Baltimore whose tech startup was acquired for $15 million. They all grew up in struggling communities and they all want to invest in those places, but they don't know how. What are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe we should start a consulting practice. Not just urban development, but wealth stewardship for community impact. Help families figure out how to use their resources to build up the places that shape them. The idea was brilliant. You think there are enough people in our situation to make that work? Mama, there are thousands of people every year who come into significant money. Lottery, inheritance, business sales, lawsuit settlements. Most of them either spend it on themselves or donate it to big charities. But some of them, especially people who grew up poor, want to do something more direct, more personal. And you could help them figure out how? We could help them, all of us. Jerome could consult on sustainable business development, Marcus on housing and neighborhood revitalization. I could handle the planning and coordination. You could work with them on community engagement and nonprofit development. I thought about Patricia Chen in Oakland, about the other callers I'd talked to that day, about all the communities across the country that were struggling with the same issues Detroit had faced. We'd be teaching people to fish instead of just giving them fish. Exactly. And in the process, we'd be creating a network of people who are committed to community investment instead of community abandonment. Chapter 13. The Unexpected Gift. That weekend, the whole family gathered for our usual Sunday dinner, but this time we had guests. Patricia Chen and her husband David had flown in from Oakland to meet us in person and see what we'd built. They brought their 8-year-old daughter, Lucy, who immediately bonded with Zoe and disappeared into the backyard with all the other kids. Over dinner, Patricia and David shared their story. They'd grown up in the same Oakland neighborhood. High school sweethearts who'd both gotten scholarships to UC Berkeley, both studied computer science, both landed jobs at tech companies in Silicon Valley. They'd lived the American dream, worked hard, saved money, started their own company, and sold it for enough money to never work again. But the whole time we were building our success, David said, our old neighborhood was falling apart. The corner store where I bought candy as a kid is gone. The community center where Patricia learned to play basketball is scheduled for demolition. Half the families we grew up with have been priced out. We feel guilty, Patricia admitted, like we escaped and left everyone else behind. But now you want to come back, Jerome said. It wasn't a question. We want to try, but we don't know if it's possible, or if it would even be welcome. After dinner, we took them on a tour of the neighborhood. We walked past the community center that had been built in the old school, past the blocks of houses Marcus was renovating, past Jerome's workshop where beautiful furniture was taking shape from discarded wood. But more importantly, we introduced them to people. Mr. Hassan at the corner store, who told them about the microloan program we'd started for small business owners. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, who showed them the community garden that had been planted in what used to be a vacant lot. 3 of the mothers from my Second Chance Families program, who talked about the businesses they'd started and the children they were raising with new hope for the future. By the end of the evening, Patricia was crying again, but these were different tears. This isn't just about money, she said. This is about relationship. You didn't just write checks. You moved back. You invested yourselves. You became neighbors again. That's the only way it works, I told her. Money without presence is just charity. Presence without commitment is just tourism. You need both, and you need time. 3 months later, Patricia and David Chen moved back to Oakland with a plan similar to ours. They kept enough money to live comfortably and invested the rest in their old neighborhood. Affordable housing, small business loans, a new community center, scholarship funds for local kids. More importantly, they bought a house 3 blocks from where they'd grown up and became neighbors again to the people they'd known as children. They weren't the only ones. Over the course of that year, Keisha's consulting practice worked with 8 different families who were using significant wealth to invest in their home communities. A lottery winner in Milwaukee who focused on job training programs. An inheritance recipient in Phoenix who started a credit union for underserved families. A business owner in Baltimore who bought and renovated an entire city block. Each family's approach was different, but the pattern was the same. Presence, relationship, long-term commitment, and the understanding that real community change happens slowly, one relationship at a time. Chapter 14. The Next Generation. 2 years after winning the lottery, I was sitting in the audience at Jamal's high school graduation. My 15-year-old grandson was valedictorian of his class, and his speech was about the responsibility that comes with opportunity. "My family won the lottery a couple of years ago," he said, and the audience chuckled. "But the real lottery wasn't the money. It was being raised by people who taught me that success isn't about escaping your circumstances. It's about transforming them." He talked about growing up in Detroit during its worst years, about watching his father struggle to find steady work, about living in a neighborhood where too many kids didn't believe college was possible for them. Then he talked about the changes he'd witnessed: new businesses, renovated houses, adults going back to school, children who now believed they could become anything they wanted. "I'm going to study urban planning at University of Michigan," he said, "and when I graduate, I'm coming back to Detroit. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because this city raised me and I want to help raise the next generation of Detroit kids." In the audience, Jerome was crying. Denise was crying. Hell, I was crying. After the ceremony, we had a party at my house. The backyard was full of folding tables, mismatched chairs, and 3 generations of family and friends. Mr. Hassan from the corner store was there, along with Mrs. Patterson and the mothers from my Second Chance program. Patricia and David Chen had flown in from Oakland with their daughter Lucy. Other families we'd worked with through Keisha's consulting practice had come from around the country. As the evening wound down and people started to leave, Jamal came and sat beside me on the porch swing. "Grandmama, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Baby, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just kept the money for yourself? If you'd moved to Florida or somewhere warm and lived quietly?" I thought about it. Sometimes. Why? I was talking to some kids at school about it. Some of them think our family is crazy for staying in Detroit when we could live anywhere. They say we're wasting our opportunity. What do you think? He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the neighborhood that had shaped him. The streetlights were working now. That had been one of our first community projects. The houses were mostly occupied and well-maintained. Children were playing in yards instead of empty lots. I think there are different kinds of opportunities. There's the opportunity to be comfortable, and there's the opportunity to matter. We chose to matter. And are you okay with that choice? Even though it means you'll probably never be as wealthy as you could have been if we'd just invested the money and lived off the interest? "Grandmama, look around." He gestured toward the backyard where his cousins were playing, where his parents were laughing with neighbors, where multiple generations of family and friends were sharing food and stories. How could anyone be wealthier than this? Epilogue. 5 years later. 5 years after winning the lottery, I wake up every morning in the same house where I raised my children, but it's a different neighborhood now. Not gentrified, we've been careful about that, but renewed. Stable. Full of families who chose to stay and build rather than leave and start over somewhere else. Jerome's furniture company now employs 47 people and has a waiting list for custom pieces. He's been featured in design magazines and has furniture in boutique hotels across the country. More importantly, he's trained 12 formerly unemployed Detroit residents in woodworking and furniture design. Keisha's consulting firm has worked with over 50 families across the country, helping them use significant wealth for community development. She's written a book about sustainable urban renewal and speaks at conferences internationally. But she still lives 4 blocks from where she grew up, and she still volunteers at the community center every Thursday. Marcus has renovated 6 complete blocks in the neighborhood, creating affordable housing for 200 families. Well, he's also started a construction training program that has graduated 85 people who now work in the building trades across Southeast Michigan. His daughter Zoe is 8 now, and his son Marcus Jr. is 4. And they both speak casually about the house's daddy fixes, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. My Second Chance Families Foundation has helped over 300 single mothers with everything from college tuition to business startup costs to down payments on homes. 12 of those women have gone on to start their own businesses, and 47 of their children have graduated from college. But the numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is in the details. It's in the fact that Zoe walks to school every morning past houses where she knows the families, where adults watch out for her safety, not because they're paid to, but because that's what neighbors do. It's in the fact that when Mrs. Patterson had a stroke last year, she didn't go to a nursing home. She went to live with her niece in the renovated house Marcus had sold to her family at cost. It's in the fact that Mr. Hassan's oldest son just graduated from Wayne State University with a degree in engineering, funded by a scholarship from our foundation, and he's coming back to the neighborhood to start a community technology center. It's in the fact that the corner where we used to have drug dealers now has a farmer's market every Saturday, run by residents who learned urban agriculture through one of our programs. The real story is that we didn't just change our circumstances. We changed what circumstances were possible in our community. Last month, I got a call from a journalist who was writing a follow-up story about our family. She wanted to know if we had any regrets, if there was anything we'd do differently. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. The only thing I regret, I told her, is that it took winning the lottery for us to realize we had the power to change things all along. We always had each other. We always had our skills, our knowledge, our commitment to family. The money just gave us the confidence to believe those things were enough. But surely the money made the difference. The money made it easier. But the real difference was made by the decision to stay, to build, to invest ourselves in something bigger than our individual comfort. That night, I sat in my living room, the same room where I'd told my children about winning the lottery, where we'd made the decision that changed all our lives. And I thought about a conversation I'd had earlier that day with Patricia Chen. She'd called to tell me that her daughter Lucy, now 13, had decided she wanted to study community development in college. "She wants to do what your family did," Patricia had said. "She wants to help other families figure out how to use resources to build up their communities." That's wonderful. Lorraine, can I tell you something? When Lucy was little, before we moved back to Oakland, she used to ask me why we didn't live near our families, why we didn't know our neighbors, why we felt like strangers in our own city. What did you tell her? I told her that's just how life worked. You grew up somewhere. You worked hard to get somewhere better, and you left the old place behind. But watching her grow up in Oakland, seeing her develop relationships with 3 generations of neighbors, watching her understand that she's part of something bigger than herself, I realized I was wrong. About what? About what somewhere better actually means. After we hung up, I walked outside and sat on my porch. The neighborhood was quiet. The good kind of quiet that comes when people are safely inside their homes, not the empty kind of quiet that comes when people have given up and moved away. I thought about the lottery ticket I'd bought 5 years ago, about the numbers that had matched, about the choice I'd made to share the winnings with conditions attached. But mostly, I thought about the real lottery, the one where the prize isn't money, but the knowledge that your life mattered, that you left your corner of the world better than you found it, that the children in your family grew up believing they could change things because they watched the adults in their lives do exactly that. I'd won that lottery long before I'd ever bought a ticket. The ticket just helped me realize it. As I finish writing this story, sitting in my kitchen at age 65, I look around at the family photos covering every surface. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren who are growing up with possibilities I could never have imagined. The phone rings constantly with calls from families across the country who want advice on using wealth for community development. My calendar is full of speaking engagements, foundation meetings, and Sunday dinners that regularly include 30 people. People sometimes ask me if I ever get tired of the responsibility, if I ever wish I'd just taken the money and lived quietly. The answer is no, because I learned something important in those weeks after winning the lottery. There's no such thing as living quietly when you have the power to change things. Silence, when you have resources and influence, is just another form of abandonment. The real lottery isn't about the money you win, it's about the person you choose to become when you have the power to choose. And on that lottery, I hit the jackpot every single day.